Hey team, today we've got a video going through the details of how I saved one of my clients $50,000 when they were buying a new purchase. I'm going to go through that story later on in this video, but I'm also going to showcase the fundamentals that I share with my clients that they need to know in terms of the negotiation process. One common thing as well that I've noticed too being in the mortgage industry is that majority of mortgage brokers that I've experienced and sort of seen or heard is that they find that their most key responsibility in terms of helping in the transaction is arranging the lending, and that predominantly is what mortgage brokers do. But I find in my experience the sort of differentiator in my service is like not only am I providing that best solution and just arranging the funds, which I actually think is quite a simple thing to do. It's not super complex, but it's also helping on that transaction of the negotiation, giving 2 cents and things in terms of how that's going to set them up financially and doing that purchase and that analysis. But negotiation I find is like a really critical part in all this. And if I can save a client, say 50 grand here, 20 grand here, whatever it is, I think that's a really influential part in terms of my service and what I offer. So I'm going to go through some of the things I did in this specific example and also what I pass on generally to my clients. So let's get into it. So this specific property that my client was interested in buying, I think it was listed for $1,250,000. So I'm going to put this price here. It was in a town maybe of like 50,000 people, quite a nice coastal town in New Zealand, I guess I could say. So yeah, asking price was at this level. And unfortunately, when the listing became available, my client wasn't in the position to make an offer on this property. We were sort of waiting on a pre-approval and they were a little bit uncertain of what they could do. And someone else has actually made an offer on this property, I think probably at pretty similar levels to where this is at. I say pretty similar levels because the agent is not necessarily supposed to disclose what any other offers are at least here in New Zealand. And I think it's probably common standard around the world. But from the investigation my client did, I think it was pretty clear that the asking price and the original offer that was under contract was around about this price that we found out. And during that process of them having the property under contract, I was in the work of getting my clients prepared for finance, given the reassurance that they could bid. And during this time, it was quite an emotional period for my client, right? They were thinking like, okay, what could they do? They can potentially submit, say, like a backup offer and come in the event that this deal falls through, the original one. But I said to them, it's probably best to hold out, because one thing to note too in this transaction is obviously there's like a lot of emotion riding on this, is the fact that they're buying this property at 1.25 million, say in like, late 2025 in a town of 50,000 people. There's honestly not so many people that have the capability of doing this. And this property, it wasn't like it was probably worth, say, $1,500,000. Like I was currently looking at the bank valuations week on week to see sort of where it was sitting, and also looking at the comparable sales for my client, right? So I was working on the finance in the background, trying to get that done as fast as I possibly could. But it was in the queue waiting for assessors to approve this deal. So I was trying to think of things that could be done on the side. But at this process, I wasn't giving it too much attention, right? Because there were things for my client and myself that were out of our control, right? We were waiting for finance. Another person had secured the property at this price on the condition of whatever the condition was, I guess. But, we were thinking like, what should we make a backup offer for? My clients, they were very, very, very intent on offering $1,300,000. But I said to them, look, this is obviously a lifestyle decision for them to buy this property. But from like, say, a bank's point of view and the future value point of view, and also in the event they want to sell the property, I highly recommended that this probably wasn't necessary for them to do. And I completely went through the reason with them. And this is like a very contrarian thing for a mortgage broker to do, because from a mortgage broker's perspective, say for this specific purchase, let's say this wasn't my client's situation, but let's say the loan for this property required $1 million loan. The client might have had 300K of cash. In that scenario, that's a pretty big opportunity for, say, a broker, right? Like most brokers, this is pretty common knowledge, I guess, would probably receive a commission somewhere between 0.5 to 0.9% of the lending amount, at least here in New Zealand. So if we look at that, that's about a, sorry, key to my numbers wrong, guys, about a $7,000 commission. Whereas, say, like if the purchase price is less, then the loan is less and the commission is less, right? So a broker, even though they're in the best financial interest of the client, is like something that some brokers honestly might not be prepared to do. But I would say to them, look, I genuinely don't think you should offer 1.3 here, because I think you can get this for less. In the event that this deal doesn't go through, doesn't look like there's a lot of buyers. So I think there's a high probability, if it's conditional and it's taking this amount of time, because we'd be dragging on the process longer and longer in this scenario, I think you can get it at the asking price and maybe even lower. So Turns out later on, we got the pre-approval, clients were prepared to make an offer on this, and they made a backup offer, and this deal wasn't going through. So clients basically ultimately ended up buying it at 1.25. Honestly, maybe they could have got a little bit less, and I was sort of, pushing them to even try get for less, right? Because one thing to note too, and I've been seeing commentary on this a lot in Australia, is like, say if you're the only interested party in this, and this is very common in say like auction events, is maybe you will have a circumstance where like the vendor is effectively outbidding you. And if you're the only interested party, you should be able to dictate terms a lot more in terms of price, right? Like say for this, coastal town of 50,000 people at this purchase price, maybe the only other interested party might have been only prepared to pay up to $1.1 million for this. So even though the asking price is 125, the market is suggesting that the next highest bidder is 1.1, and I'm saying these kind of things to my client, right? But they've, made the judgment that they're buying it at asking. It was also quite reflective of the bank valuation, so it was quite a fair price. So one thing I pass on to my clients is specifically this thing. Like I've been seeing it specifically more so in Australia and buyers agents, but not necessarily here in New Zealand. I always think it's important that like I'm seeing like a global perspective of like how people are negotiating on properties and getting the best outcome, right? Because ultimately in property, at least in my experience, is like the money is truly and genuinely made in the deal. So if you can potentially lower this margin or get it closer to say maybe this specific, analogy or something I'm sharing, it's important. And I'm not even going into depth in terms of things of like, what's important in terms of how you can potentially negotiate as well. Like if there's a unsatisfactory building report or limb report or other things, doing that and thinking about that is really, really important, because how it's going to set you up moving forward. So what I'm trying to get from this video basically, guys, is like this is an example of a client, but it's not only, this example where, I'm trying to help a client. I think it's an important thing for a broker to help, because they should be part of the journey of any purchaser's experience in terms of the 2 cents they pass on, right? They're arranging the finance, but they also should be enabling you to, get yourself in a position where you aren't stuck, so you can buy property moving forward or do what you want to do moving forward as well. I think that's actually the most key thing in my experience being in the industry, and that's sort of what gets me hyped and motivated to work in this sort of landscape and field. So anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed that. If you do want to actually have a conversation with me about your position and maybe looking at a property and you want my 2 cents, always happy to provide that, guys. It's kind of why I make these videos, to try win the opportunity to win your business here. So hopefully you guys like that one. Feel free to also watch other videos of mine. I made a few videos now, so feel free to check them out, and hopefully they're helpful. Cheers.